Good morning. Very happy to be here today and to have a chance to meet some of you already and visit with the exhibitors that are presenting here. I'm going to talk to you this morning about trends in manufacturing ERP and how to ensure success. Before I get into that, let me just ask briefly so I can set my expectations here. How many of you do not have an ERP system today? Okay, so you're here actually looking to start with your first ERP system. How many of you have an ERP system today and are considering a change to a different system? Okay. And how many of you are here selling ERP? Nobody? There's one honest person. Okay. You're selling. Okay, how many of you here are here for the breakfast or no reason at all? Okay, good. It's very interesting. You would think that nearly everybody has an ERP system today, but it's interesting that still, and we'll see some statistics on this in a minute. Many companies are still, through growth and so on, are looking actually for their first ERP system. So again, just a little bit about myself. I've spent most of my career from the early days in manufacturing. I work with many different sectors of business today, but my roots are in manufacturing and always enjoy speaking with people that make things or produce things or distribute things. I like things that I can handle, feel, and touch. I'm an APIX fellow, certified at fellow level in 1981. That gives you some idea. Cindy talked a little bit about her age yesterday. I'm not sure, Cindy, who started first, but I think we're probably pretty close. So later this afternoon, there'll be a young person speaking to you. But
yes, the year I was born.
Okay, nobody guessed. All right. I actually carry 3 business cards. I'm the co-founder and president of Strativa. This is a management consulting firm. As Brad explained, we help organizations with business strategy, IT strategy, business process improvement, and making major technology decisions. In 2005, we acquired Computer Economics, which is a 30-year-old IT research firm. We provide metrics for IT management and things like staffing and spending ratios, adoption, ROI, TCO, metrics on new technologies. And I'm going to share some of those with you today. So very interesting little business, complements our management consulting business. And then last year, a number of us came together to form Constellation Research, which is a membership organization of which I am a member. This also expands my consulting and management consulting services to a broader range of companies. So I carry 3 cards. You'll hear me refer to all 3 of these during the presentation. Also, I was one of the first tech bloggers. In 2002, I started the Enterprise Systems Spectator as kind of an experiment to see if this would be something that would be useful, and still going today. In fact, it led to my relationship to Computer Economics and also Constellation Research. So check it out. It's free. fscavo@blogspot.com, or give me your business card. I'll send you the link. And a lot of good free information there. So summing it up, I'm really an advocate for IT buyers. I like to sit on the buyer side of the table. I deal a lot with software vendors. I'm very friendly. I learn a lot of information from them. I talk with them all the time. But at the end of the day, I like to sit with the buyer, represent the buyer's best interest, and help them be successful. So what I've put together here today is really kind of a summary of many of the lessons learned over the past 20 or 30 years that I've been working with ERP and MRP and so on. So 3 key things we're going to cover today. Very simple. What technologies are manufacturers investing in this year? What's hot? What's not? I'm going to share with you the silver lining of ERP problems. One thing I think that today is different from 20 or 30 years ago is that everyone has heard of all the horror stories, all the war stories about companies that have had problems or failures with ERP. I'm here to tell you today that there's a silver lining in those problems. So wait for that. We'll be telling you about the silver lining of ERP problems, and then I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, how to ensure that your implementation is successful. So I hope this is helpful to you. So the good news, based upon our research in computer economics, this is based upon a survey we've been doing since 1990. The IT spending recession is over. Now I know for many of us it doesn't feel like recovery, but actually things are better this year. Based on our survey, we see that IT budgets are increasing at about a 2% rate across the board. Over half of companies, this is generally not just manufacturing, are increasing their IT budgets this year. Only 22% are cutting budgets. On the capital spending side, over 50% are increasing their IT capital spending. So this is good news. This was not the case in 2008. This was not the case in 2009 and 2010. This year, for the first time, we've moved into the above 50% category in increasing IT budgets. So that's good news. Now, whether we're going to have another recession, that's another story. We'll find out in the coming months. But right now, spending is increasing. And you'll be very happy to hear that manufacturing and distribution organizations are actually leading, one of the sectors that are leading the increase in IT spending. 4.5% for wholesale distribution, 3.8% increase at the median for discrete manufacturing, process manufacturing a little bit less, but those are all above the 2% level across the board for all industries. When we ask them their top priorities in manufacturing firms, what are their top priorities for IT spending? Number one, and this is not the case in other sectors, they said we want to increase or gain competitive advantage through IT. And we're interested in implementing new systems. So this is good. I mean, a lot of times we think of manufacturing companies as being laggards in technology. We think of healthcare, or we think of financial services or insurance firms and so on as being leaders in technology adoption. But actually this year, it's manufacturers that are pulling into the lead in terms of new investments. So what are manufacturers? Now this information is just for manufacturing organizations. What are they making their investments in? So we ask them two ways. We want to know if they have the technology in place, right? They may have it or may not have it. And then we want to know if they're spending money on it this year. So some companies have the technology, they're spending more money. Some companies do not have the technology and they're investing for the first time. So there's two different numbers. We call it the adoption rate and the investment rate. 84% of manufacturers have ERP in place, but 48% are spending more money on ERP this year. I mean, think about that. Nearly half the companies, manufacturing companies, are spending new money on ERP this year. Well, you say, well, if there's 84% already have ERP, what are the 48% spending it on? Well, they're either buying it for the first time, like some of you are, or they're changing to a new ERP system. But many of them are making new investments in ERP. And that's to either because they're growing and they need additional seats, or they want to do new things. And we're going to see through this presentation that it's very important because ERP is the foundation for so many other things that you want to do. What are those other things? Customer relationship management. 15% have it in place, 42% are investing this year. Business intelligence, right? Could be anything from simple report writing to data warehouse to business analytics, management dashboards, right? 60% have something they call business intelligence in place. 34% are making new investments this year. Supply chain management, which is huge for distribution companies. 46% have it in place, 32% investing this year. And a new area is mobility applications, being able to access information on the go, right? Whether you're in a hotel room, you're here in a conference, you're out in the field, you're visiting customers. This is a new area where you have a smartphone or other handheld device that's giving you access to your system in real time, any place, at any time, right? 16%, only 16% have the technology in place, but you see 24% are making investments this year. So these are the areas, we surveyed 16 technologies in our survey. These are the areas that are hot right now for manufacturing. Like I said a minute ago, of these 5 areas, right, they're not just 5 independent technology initiatives. ERP, in fact, is the foundation for all of them. Like Cindy said yesterday, this provides the system of record and a single source for the truth for so many of these other systems. So you can go ahead and implement a CRM system, for example, without ERP, and some companies do that. But it works much better if you have the foundation of ERP in place, because you're going to share information, customer numbers, right? Part numbers, item numbers, right? You're going to take quotes and estimates, and you're going to convert them into customer orders, right? If you're using CRM on the backside, you're going to have your field service and your customer service organizations have access to the information in ERP. The whole thing is an integrated system, right? It's an integrated system. So customer relationship management, supply chain management, of course, on the supply side as well as on the demand side, works much better if you have an ERP system. And of course, mobility applications need something to integrate with, right? So all of these are very important as building upon the ERP system as the foundation. So that's a little bit about what companies are investing in. But as we all know, ERP can be a risky implementation. I would say, a lot of this presentation, I was telling someone yesterday, I could have given a lot of this 15 years ago. In fact, I did. I gave presentations like this 15 years ago. I said, well, what's different in the last 15 or 20 years? I would say one thing that's different is that companies now are sensitive to how important it is to ensure success. When we surveyed on total cost of ownership, we found that ERP systems across the board, all industries, 38% of organizations said they exceed their budget for total cost. Out of the 16 technologies that we surveyed this year, ERP comes in dead last place in terms of cost performance. Now think about that. Out of 16 things you could do with your money, if you go to Las Vegas, right, you're going to want to put your money where the odds are the best, right? ERP, in other words, ERP has the odds for being the most risky in terms of exceeding your budgets. Well, why would you ever want to do it? Well, because for all the reasons we just listed, right? Very important. But we have to understand that there is a cost risk. The picture gets worse because the risks with ERP are not just cost, right? You have cost risk, right? You could break the bank, but you also have functionality risks. In other words, the system might not do, after you get it implemented, you might find out that the system is not doing what you need it to do. Or it might do what you need it to do today, but a year from now, your business might change and it no longer supports your business. So there might be functionality risk. And we see this all the time. There's also adoption risk. You might meet your budget. You might come in on schedule. But your users are not using the system. Right? They're using side systems, they're using parts of the old system, they're simply getting their job done without using the system that you just spent all this effort on to install. You don't want that to happen, right? And finally, there could be benefit risks. You could bring the system in on time, you could bring it in on budget, but you're not getting the benefits from the system that you thought you were going to get. So from a cost standpoint, from a schedule standpoint, the project was a success. But from a benefit standpoint, the project is a failure, right? So ERP failure, a lot of talk today about IT failure, ERP failure. All depends on what you're measuring against. If you're measuring against cost and schedule, you can be successful. But if you're looking at functionality, adoption, and benefits, you could be not so successful. So let me talk about a case study. This is a company that we work with at Strativa a few years ago, and a very interesting project. We had been in there a couple years earlier, and it helped them in their selection. The company was relatively small. They couldn't afford a lot of consulting help. So they said, come on in and help us identify our requirements, which we did, and help us identify a short list of vendors that we should look at that will help that will meet these needs. And we did that. We gave them a short list of about 5 vendors. And we stayed with them and we introduced each of these vendors. We had 5 vendors. We introduced them, got them started. They said, great, good enough. Thank you for your help. We can take it from here. And they went ahead. We said, that's fine, no problem. We understand. So they did the demos. They did the contract negotiation. And they managed the implementation themselves internally. About 2 years later, I got a phone call. I said, Frank, we got a problem. What is it? Well, that system that we installed, we're not sure we made the right choice. So why is that? Well, we're having all kinds of problems. The users are up in arms. Nobody's happy. We're not sure if maybe we made the wrong choice. Could you come back and do an assessment? I said, we'd love to do that. So we came back, and the first thing we did was we made a list of all the symptoms of where they were unhappy. So I'm not going to read all this to you. The order entry process was cumbersome, had poor support for return material, poor visibility costing of WIP, product information engineering changes not tightly controlled, poor response time. This is just a sample. We had, many more than this, right? But this is just a sample of the kind of problems that we solved. So then we said, as good lean manufacturing principles, let's go in and do a root cause analysis. So we went in and we said, let's trace these symptoms to what the real problem is. Is it the software or is it something else? And we used a framework that I love to do to categorize into 4 broad categories. Category 1, you picked the wrong system. The functionality is a mismatch, right? System performance is poor. System is not scalable. There are unresolved bugs with the software. In other words, there's something wrong with the system itself. Number 2, you picked the right system, but you didn't set it up correctly. Things like you didn't configure your business processes in the system, you loaded system tables, but you left out information. These are just examples, there's more than this. But for example, product cost elements do not have enough detail. You didn't set up inventory locations. So you're using the system, but you didn't set it up correctly to meet your needs. There's nothing wrong with the software. The software is fine, but you didn't set it up correctly. Okay? Number 3, you picked the right system. There's nothing wrong with the system, but you're not using it. You have an unfinished implementation. Sometimes I refer to this as the phase 2 syndrome, right? When you're under the gun to finish the project on time and within budget, you start jettisoning out features that you're going to implement, right? Well, we're not going to implement return material, right? Or we're not going to implement bin location tracking. We do 4-wall inventory, right? We're going to save that for what? Phase 2. Well, the funny thing happens is many times phase 2 never happens, right? Because everybody's exhausted, they got the system in. Let's just leave it alone for a while, right? So I call it the phase 2 syndrome. Put off stuff till phase 2, and phase 2 never happened. Lack of knowledge about system features. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a company. They say they need X, and I look at the system that they have, and it does X, but they didn't know that, right? So lack of knowledge. Parts of the old system are still in use, or users are creating little side systems, Excel models, access databases, manual systems to do things that should be done or could be done in the system, but they're using little side systems. How many of you have ever seen that? Right? We've all seen that, right? And then finally, the system is good. You set it up correctly. You're using it, but you're not using it effectively. You have data inaccuracy problems. You don't have user procedures, or you have procedures, but you're not following them. So you have poor disciplines. You have lack of training or organizational problems, disincentives to doing the right thing, right? Motivating people to do something other than the right thing with the system. Okay, so let me stop right here and ask, of those 4 categories, which do you think is the greatest? Number 4. How many think number 1 is the main problem? No. Okay. Number 2. How many think number 2 is the main problem? No. Number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 3. Number 4, the last one. Okay, most of you think number 4 is the last one. All right. Now this may vary from company to company, right? I'm only going to tell you about this experience that I just described to you with this manufacturing firm. Okay, whether the mix on this, is the majority are here, here, or here. The point is, and I think this is usually the case. Now, I've seen companies where, in fact, they do have the wrong system. They made the wrong choice. But most of the time, the system that they have, there might have been a better system out there, who knows? But the system that they have is good enough, right? The problem is not the software. The problem is how they installed it or set it up, their use or lack thereof of the system, and their effectiveness. The business process side of it is the problem. So think about that. That brings us to the silver lining of ERP problems. If you think about that, that means most of the problems that companies experience with ERP are things that are under your control. You don't need to switch software, right? If you have the right system, that means most of the problems that you're having with that software are things that you can do something about. So when you go out, many of you are shopping for new software. When you go out and you finish your implementation, and you look at any problems that you're having or difficulties, you got to turn around and the temptation is to blame the software or to blame the vendor. Now, in some cases, vendors need to be blamed, right? They need to be held accountable. They need to deliver what they promised. But the majority of problems are things that you can do something about within your 4 walls. So the message here is to take responsibility for your success. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. All right, so the question is, if ERP is the foundation, and ERP is delivering benefits for companies, and even though many companies are implementing, manufacturing firms are implementing ERP because of those benefits, how can we maximize those benefits and mitigate those risks? I'm going to tell you about 5 best practices that we've learned over the years, and these are not unique to us, to me or my consulting business. These, I think, are pretty much generally recognized as being the keys to your success. So here they are. First of all, to formulate a roadmap. You can't get to where you need to go until you know where you're going, right? Where do we want to be? Pick the right system and partner. Now, I just said most of the problems are not with, I'm going to go into each of these in just a minute. Most of the problems are not with the system, but still you have to pick the right system, because sometimes companies do pick the wrong system, and I've seen that again and again. And the right partner. You have to redesign business processes. ERP, I would say, more than any other type of investment, demands that you do business differently, probably than how you're doing business today. Fourth, you have to budget for your side of the deal. We'll talk about what that means, and avoid some common mistakes. So let's talk about each of those. First, formulate your IT roadmap. Now you could say, well, that's true for any technology, right? We got to know where we're going, right? But it's especially true for ERP, because like we talked about a minute ago, ERP is either going to enable some things or constrain your choices on other things. And I've seen too many companies go out and say, we need a new system. They go out and they buy a new ERP system, and they say, okay, now we need supply chain management. Say, uh-oh, our ERP provider either does not have good supply chain management, or the wrong supply chain management, or does not have good integration with the system that we really need in our industry. Right? Same thing with CRM. Same thing with mobility. Same thing with business intelligence. So before you get too far down, now I know many of you are here because you're already shopping for ERP, right? But before you get too far down that path, you should go back and decide what's our 3-year or 5-year roadmap going to look like. Because ERP is going to affect those other decisions. So you want to ask these kind of questions. What does the business expect from IT? Should we renew or replace our existing systems? What are the benefits of cost? How much should we spend? What's the right budget? Right? Too many companies go out and they say, we want quotes from vendors, but they don't know what their own budget is internally. Should we deploy on site, in the cloud? What is the right sequence? And how is this going to enable or constrain our future initiatives? So developing a roadmap is a very important thing to do. Recently did this for a very large manufacturing firm. We looked out over 5 years and looked at all the things that they needed to do to make the right choices today with their existing systems as well as where they wanted to be. Okay, second is pick the right system. This is the process that we use. We start with the IT roadmap, which we just talked about, and then we identify the key requirements. What does the system need to do in a distinctive way for my business? Do I need serial number control, right? Do I need lot control? Do I need 4-wall inventory? Do I need bin locations, right? Do I need to support cycle count, right? All very, very important. What are the things about my business that makes me different from other businesses? And what are the things that I'm going to look for in software that not all systems can do, right? Used to be a time when we said the system must have full screen order entry, right? Now every system does full screen order. You don't need to specify that, right? You need to specify the things that are unique about your business and things that make systems different from one another. You research your vendors, and I like to come up with a short list of 3 to 5, right? That upon first glance appear to satisfy my key requirements. Then I set up a vendor introduction meeting. This is not a demo. This is a meeting to get to know this vendor, find out whether they can meet my key requirements or whether there's something there that is going to eliminate them from consideration. And then come up with a list of 2 or 3 that you're going to demo. I've seen too many cases where companies go out and they try to demo 7 systems. The problem with that is you're going to wear out your project team. You're going to forget what one system looks like versus another. You're going to forget which one looks like what, and the whole thing comes to a screeching halt. So do that work up front. You get down to the 2 or 3. I like 2, frankly, but 3 is okay. And then you go into demos. You give the vendor some scenarios. You don't want them to be too detailed, but you don't want them to be just general. You want to give them some information, let them demonstrate, come up with your finalists, which would be 1 or 2, and then you go and qualify and negotiate with that vendor and hopefully come up with a good contract that's going to work for you. So these are all things that we do year in and year out. Now, as I said a minute ago, it's not only important to pick the right system, it's important to pick the right implementation support team. Now, the implementation support team, in many cases, will come from the vendor directly. I know the vendors that are here exhibiting today, I know many of them have their own support teams that do that. Many of them also have business partners. And in addition, there are also independent firms that provide support for some of these vendors, right? So which one should you use? You need to qualify the partner just like you qualify the software. We like to do it at 4 levels. The general qualifications of the firm, their qualifications specific to my type of business and my type of project. So they might be good with this package, but they've never implemented it in a machine shop, right? They've never implemented it in a life sciences firm, right? So you want to know about their qualifications for your type of business and your type of project. Then you want to find out who they want as the project manager or any key resources that they want to put on your project. You don't want it to be left blank to be determined. You want to know who they're going to put on the project. You want to qualify that person, just like you would if you were interviewing for a full-time position at your company. You want to check his or her references. You want to look at his or her resume, right? You want to see if they have relevant experience and be sure that there's a good rapport and you're comfortable with that person being on your team. And then, like I said, then you do the reference checks as well, right? Reference checks on the company and reference checks on that individual. Now, it sounds like a lot of work, but you know, it's if you think that's a lot of work, if you don't have time to do it right, you got time to do it over, right? You want to be successful. So this is a key point that I can't emphasize enough. Third, you need to redesign your business processes. As we saw a minute ago, nearly 3/4 of post-implementation issues are business process related. They're not technical. This is your chance to do things not just faster, but better, right? So this gets to the whole effective use of the new system. The best implementations I've seen are where companies are willing to go in and reconsider some of their basic assumptions about how they do business. The software that vendors are releasing today many times embodies the best practices from their customers. So you need to pay attention. Just because you've done it a certain way all these years doesn't mean there's not a better way to do it. So implementing ERP gives you a golden opportunity to reevaluate how you do business. And that's where most of the benefits are going to come from. The benefits aren't going to come from the software itself. The benefits are going to come from your ability to do things better and differently than you're doing today. And that can give you a competitive advantage. Which brings us to this question. Does that mean we need to come to a screeching halt in our vendor selection and redesign our entire business processes before we go out and select a new system? Or do we go out and buy the best system and then change our business to do business the way that system operates? Well, the answer is both. You need to take a high-level look at your business processes and decide what unique characteristics the software needs to conform to, right? Like we talked about a minute ago. Do I need four-wall inventory? Do I need bin locations? Do I need lot tracking? Do I need serial tracking? Right? Do I need to have product configuration? What do my configurations look like? Right? What kind of integration do I need with engineering, with purchasing, right? With logistics? You need to look at those things because those become the high-level criteria for your vendor selection. Once you've then selected the vendor, then you take at a detailed level the processes in the software and you use them to then further redesign your business processes. So which comes first, the chicken or the egg? They both come together. You get a chicken and you get an egg, right? You need to do both. You need to do some business process design before you select, and you need to then use the system you select to redesign your business process. It's the best practice. And the implementations I've seen that are most successful follow this type of approach. The fourth key is to budget for your side of the deal. So what do I mean by that? Well, you have a budget for hardware and software. You have a budget for your implementation consultant, right? But there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you need to budget for. What are those things? Those are things that the vendor either will not do or that the vendor is not very good at. So what do we mean by that? Things like overall project management. Now, the project management for an ERP system is not just to install and implement the software. It's to make those changes that we talked about on your side of the business. I have honestly never seen a vendor that can manage your business process changes in your company. That's either got to come from you or from an outside advisor that you retain to help you do that, right? That's not different from the hardware and software implementation. It's complementary. So you need to budget for that. You need to budget for vendor management. Who's keeping an eye on the vendor? Who's ensuring that they're not switching people in and out of the implementation? Who's ensuring that they're meeting their deliverables and that they have good communication through your organization, right? That's something that's your responsibility. Business process improvement, we just talked about that. Change management. The training, the education, developing processes, procedures, policies, training your people, getting them to accept the use of the new system, communicating throughout the organization. These are things the vendor's not going to do for you. These are things that you need to do for yourself. User acceptance testing. It's user acceptance testing. It's not vendor acceptance testing. You have to organize and coordinate that activity to be sure that system performs as you intend. And then training and documentation. The vendor is going to go ahead and train your project team, but again, I've never seen vendors do a very good job at training end users on how to do their day-to-day job. That's something that you need to take that training that you got from the vendor, and you need to embody that in new processes and procedures and training material, and you need to train your people. Because next year, when you hire a new person and that vendor is out the door and he's on to another project, guess what? You're going to have to train that new person. Right? 5 years from now, you're going to have to take care of training your users. So you might as well get used to doing that now during the implementation. You're going to be a lot more successful. And then finally, this is kind of a bucket for everything else. Avoid some common mistakes, right? That companies I've seen over the years make in implementation. They overanalyze the as-is situation. I've seen companies spend months documenting their existing processes, big wall charts to get yarn, joining boxes and names and scribbles. And by the time they get done, they're no clearer about what they do than they were when they started. Right? Focus on your key characteristics and processes. Those are the things that make you different. You want to focus your efforts, right? Don't over-specify the new system. I've seen companies go out and document a phone book of requirements. The system must do 3,600 things. Seriously, I've seen RFPs that are 100, 200 pages. Nobody in the company knows what's in that 200 pages. And the vendors throw up their hands and say, I don't know how to deal with this. You don't need an RFP that long, right? Don't over-specify. Focus on the key requirements and the differentiators like we talked about earlier. Letting vendors drive the demo. Sitting back, vendor comes in and gives his dog and pony story. Gee, that looks great. I love that. I love the colors. I love the fact that I can configure the screens, right? Those are not very useful. So you want to give the vendor some typical scenarios that your business applies to, right? Typical day-in-the-life type scenarios, and see how that system can accommodate that. On the other hand, you don't want to go down to document by the keystroke, right? You want to give the vendor some ability to take your requirements and show you how they accommodate those, perhaps in a different way than you thought was possible. Underestimating the effort that's required. If you've got a well-entrenched legacy system, some of you don't, but some of you do perhaps, understand that you're going to have to shoehorn that system out of your business. I've seen cases. I worked with a food manufacturer some years ago. We implemented a new system. I came back a year later. They were still using the old system, along with the new system. Because there were just some things that they just liked better in the old system, right? So they had two systems. So they never really got rid of the old hardware, the old software. You want to understand that you're going to need to spend some time and effort to do that. And then finally, allowing too many modifications. You're going to hear probably Eric may talk about this afternoon. Try not to change the system. Cindy talked yesterday about configuring, not customizing, right? Systems today give you the ability to configure them differently, but many times they don't. They also allow you access to the source code, and it's very tempting to go in and try to make the new system look like the old system. Really try to avoid that, because if you have an on-premise location, if you have a license to that software, it's going to make your upgrades in the future very difficult. And I would say, when I've looked at the hours that are spent on ERP implementation projects, whenever there are customizations, the implementation time and cost goes way up. And most of the bugs that you encounter are bugs in the code that you modify. So really try not to do that. Try to stick with configuring instead of customizing. And this is the last slide. If I had to sum it all up, what would I say is the key to implementation success? I would say you need to invest for your success. Right? You need to set a realistic budget. You need to be willing to spend some money, not just for hardware and software, but like I said earlier, for all the things that you need to do internally to make that system a success. Of course, you need to pick the right system. You need to pick the right partner. But you also need to commit your best people. I've been to companies where there's a certain one or two people that would be ideal to be involved in implementing the system, but they're too important and too needed in their job. I always tell them, the person that you can't afford to free up to do this project is exactly the person that you need to put on this project. Find some way to backfill that person's responsibilities. If you need to hire some temps, if you need to shift some responsibilities, free up your best people to do that, because that's going to help you get the job done in the right way. And if you need help to do any of this, raise your hand, get some help. Cindy can help, I can help, Eric's firm can help. Go out, you have local providers in your own area perhaps. Go out and get the kind of help you need and be willing to make that investment, because this is going to be the foundation for everything that you want to do in the future. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the show.